Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to a very special edition of the movie review series. And today I am going to be talking about a Batman animated movie that has been a staple part of my childhood for a really long time now. And it's one that I do go back to quite often. Maybe not as much as Mask of the Phantasm or Return of the Joker, but it's always been a favourite of mine, and it's one that I do go back to watching every once in a while. And this is an animated movie that has been a favourite among Batman fans, and as the years have gone by, it has become more and more respected, and a lot of people really enjoy this one a lot. And the animated movie that I'm talking about is, of course, Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero, which came out in 1998, exactly 28 years ago. Whew, holy cow. We are not far from the 30 mark, people. Makes you feel old, doesn't it? So, Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero. This is the second Batman animated movie, and this came out quite a few years after Mask of the Phantasm because for the longest time, Mask of the Phantasm was the only Batman animated movie that we had. And I always looked at it as, well, that's a one off because it's so special. And the very fact that we never had another one after that really cemented that fact. So I looked at it like, well, we're not going to have another one because what's the point? Because we've got one, it's epic, it's massive, it's adored by fans. There's really no need for another one. So I first became aware of Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero. I used to see adverts for it in various comic books that I would pick up. And it's kind of funny because when I saw the advertisement for Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero, I originally thought that SubZero from Mortal Kombat was actually going to be appearing. I thought maybe there was going to be some kind of crossover with Batman and Mortal Kombat because when I hear the word Sub-Zero, the first character that comes to mind is, of course, Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. So that's what I thought at the time. I thought, okay, so Batman the Animated Series is crossing over with Mortal Kombat because at the time there was a Mortal Kombat cartoon being shown on Fox Kids, which I also watched. Very good show, very underrated. So I thought maybe that's what we were kind of getting. So as time went on, I continued to buy more and more comic books, and then there was a full picture of the video, which was Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero coming soon on VHS. And I thought, oh, okay, it makes perfect sense now. So it's Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero, not SubZero from Mortal Kombat. Now, I learned that originally Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero was meant to come out at the same time as Batman and Robin, which came out in the summer of 1997. But because Batman and Robin didn't do very well at the box office, they held back on releasing this animated movie until the following year. And it's kind of ironic because Batman and Robin had Mr. Freeze as the main villain, along with Poison Ivy and Bane. So while Batman and Robin was pretty much laughed out of the room, I still say there was some good stuff to it. It was bad, but I don't think it was half as bad as some of the other DC movies that came after that. It is silly, but I've seen a lot worse, believe me. But when Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero came out, it was very well received. Lots of fans gave it very positive feedback. It did very well with critics and got very high ratings. And, I bought this on VHS in a little shop next to Woolworths called Sounds and Vision. I'm sure some of you have probably have never heard of that shop, but it used to be this cool VHS shop. It used to sell all sorts of videos, wrestling, Disney, animation, anime, you name it. There was all sorts of cool stuff. And the VHS that I got of Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, it was all silver, like ice, and the bat emblem used to shine and glow just like ice, giving that cold sort of feel to it. And it had like Sub-Zero on the front, all looking icy. So it was a very cool cover. And I remember watching it and I really enjoyed it because at the time I saw the movies, I was already well into the BTAS and really loved watching the show every day. And I was quite disappointed with Batman and Robin because I thought to myself, well, it's nothing like the cartoon because with Mr. Freeze in the cartoon, he was super serious, very cold, very machine like, almost robotic, and he had this very cold, chilling voice. Whereas Mr. Freeze in the live action movie just kept shooting out ice puns like it was going out of fashion, which was just ridiculous. But Mr. Freeze was always depicted very well in animation, especially in the 90s. So the idea of having an animated movie straight after Mask of the Phantasm, years after actually, with Mr. Freeze as the main villain, was a good move. And it was a very good film. And the thing about Sub Zero, while it was an animated movie, it kind of felt like an extended episode of the show. And what I mean by that is the story was decent, but it wasn't quite on the same epic scale as Mask of the Phantasm because Mask of the Phantasm was such a powerful film, with such an emotional story. It really felt like a movie. It was such a high budget film, and they really threw everything, including the kitchen sink, at it and really made it something special because it was the first one. With Sub Zero, the story was emotional, but not quite the same as Mask of the Phantasm. So Sub Zero picks up where we left off at the end of Deep Freeze, because last time we saw Mr. Freeze, his whole scheme of trying to revive his wife with Grant Walker's help pretty much sunk into the ocean. Grant Walker made this big world which was like futuristic, it was so daft, and the bargaining chip was Nora Freeze. Grant Walker said, "You helped me become immortal. I will give you all the resources you need to cure and revive your wife." Mr. Freeze, of course, reluctantly granted Grant Walker's perverted wish and turned him immortal, and he was left floating, screaming in a block of ice. And we saw Mr. Freeze floated off in a block of ice with his wife, and that was pretty much it. But it was left wide open that Mr. Freeze will return because it was confirmed that his condition practically made him immortal. So I'm going to say that Sub Zero takes place obviously after Deep Freeze, but I would say it probably takes place just some time before Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson had their big falling out, which led to Dick Grayson ditching the Robin persona and becoming Nightwing. So it's kind of sometime before those flashbacks took place in Old Wounds. Or if you really want to go the other way, sometime before the Batman Adventures Lost Years story arc, which is fantastic, by the way. So we see Mr. Freeze. He's living in the North Pole with two giant polar bears. Just perfect. You know, if I was writing Mr. Freeze, screw having random thugs. Just give the guy two polar bears. That's all you need, really. A freeze gun and two massive, gnarly polar bears. That's all you really need. Who's going to mess with Mr. Freeze when he's got two massive polar bears on his side? Nobody. So I love that idea that he's got those two big polar bears with him. So he's living in the North Pole with a small boy named Kunak, and he's keeping his wife in the tank, just as we saw in Deep Freeze. And of course, that all goes out the window when we see these explorers in a submarine disturb him, and that pretty much pisses him off to the point where Victor Freeze goes back to his Mr. Freeze persona and freezes the entire crew. So that pretty much sets the tone for what goes on in SubZero. Now, by this point, Mr. Freeze is pretty much living in hibernation. He's living a peaceful life in the North Pole. He hasn't really gone back to Gotham, which is understandable because he's a wanted criminal. So he's living in peace, really, until all of these sailors and explorers disturb him. And he just says, "Right, I've had enough of this. How dare you?" And of course, Nora Freeze's tank gets knocked over and her condition relapses, and we learn that she only has like a couple of weeks to live. So basically, really, what we learn is that Barbara Gordon's blood type matches Nora Freeze's, and she needs a blood transfusion and a live donor if she is to survive. So Mr. Freeze kidnaps Barbara Gordon and kidnaps an old colleague of his named Dr. Gregory Belson, and basically he wants Nora Freeze revived and cured. So this leads to Batman and Robin going out on this mission to try and save Barbara Gordon and stop Mr. Freeze from performing this operation. So SubZero, I believe, is one of the first animated movies to really delve into CGI. I mean, Mask of the Phantasm did have CGI, but they used it quite sparingly. Whereas with SubZero, they wouldn't say it was an all CGI movie because it wasn't, but they used CGI for certain scenes like, you know, the Batwing and the North Pole, the submarine, and all sorts of various shots. So it looked really good. I mean, the animation looks really crisp. I mean, Mask of the Phantasm came out in 1993. Animation for that was phenomenal. With SubZero, animation looked great, but it was definitely a lot more sheen. It was a lot more cleaner, a bit more up to date, and a bit more modern looking as we moved into the 2000s. But it visually, it just looked amazing. It looked absolutely incredible. And Michael Ansara, who voiced Mr. Freeze, he was just at his chilling best, very cold, very robotic and stoic. He was fantastic. And, because Mr. Freeze, if anyone has watched the show, will know that Mr. Freeze, while he is a villain, he's not really evil like the Joker or the Penguin. He's just a guy who is trying to save his wife, but he obviously goes about it the wrong way, and that obviously puts him in loggerheads with Batman. So, obviously Batman sympathizes with Mr. Freeze, but obviously being Batman, he can't let Mr. Freeze do what he likes. So that obviously puts him in conflict with Mr. Freeze. So I have to say, I watched this movie I hadn't watched it in quite a long time, and it was really good. It's a really fun film. As I said, it kind of feels more like an extended episode. It's not as epic and doesn't have the gigantic scale of Mask of the Phantasm, but it's still very enjoyable. And I guess in a way, you can kind of look at SubZero as the series finale of BTS before it transitioned into TNBA. I think even TNBA was already a thing because TNBA came out in 1997, but with SubZero, this definitely felt like the finale of BTAS. That's the way I look at it. If we're going by head canon here, that's my head canon. SubZero is kind of like the last part of BTAS before they fully transitioned into the revamped episodes, which we know as TNBA. So most of the voice cast are in the movie. They all came from the show. So we got Bob Hastings, Ephraim Zambos Jr., Lauren Lester, and Melissa Gilbert, and of course the one and only the man himself, Kevin Conroy. And as I mentioned already, we've got Michael Ansaro. So we pretty much got most of the classic core cast from BTAS. So, as I said, the story for this movie is quite straightforward. Nora Freeze only has a couple of weeks to live. Barbara Gordon is kidnapped, and he wants to perform an operation in order to save her. I feel that this kind of plot works better as an episode rather than a movie because, the idea of wanting to save Nora Freeze by performing this operation and Batman and Robin in a race against time to try and save Barbara and stop Mr. Freeze from doing what he's doing. Yeah, I kind of feel like this could have worked better as an episode. So the way I look at it is, I said this before about Mystery of the Batwoman. I think SubZero could have worked better as a two-part episode, or maybe three, depending on how you want to really stretch the story. But this movie, while very enjoyable, really liked it, definitely felt more episodic. Just felt like an extended episode. Now, in this movie, we learn that Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon are already dating, so they're already in a relationship, which, believe me, that makes much more sense than Bruce Wayne and Barbara Gordon hooking up, which I have gone on record many times. I do not like that relationship at all. It's weird, it's creepy, and it's just, nah, not for me. Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon, that's where it's at. They're the same age, and it just makes more sense. Not with Bruce Wayne. Sorry. So seeing Dick and Barbara together, obviously that kind of sets up for what goes down in TNBA. So it makes perfect sense here. And we do see Barbara Gordon as Batgirl in this movie, very briefly though, for about maybe 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes, and she's like taking out some random criminals. And that's pretty much it. We don't really see Barbara in costume anymore after that. I would have liked to have seen Barbara Gordon suit up as Batgirl. Maybe we could have seen her, Batman, and Robin working together to take down Mr. Freeze on the oil rig. That could have worked. I think that would have been a great final scene. And the funny thing about that is, in Batman and Robin, we did see Batman, Robin, and Batgirl working together to take down Mr. Freeze, but it just felt really silly. Whereas in animation, it was done a lot better and a lot more serious. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that take place in the movie, even if it was just for like a few minutes. And it's funny because when Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero came out, I think I even remember some people saying, "Oh, it's a tie-in movie to Batman and Robin," and I just thought, "No, it's not. Look at it. It's BTAS designs. Why would they tie it to Batman and Robin? Especially as BTS was doing really well at the time, you know. So why would they tie it to the movie? I know they've done things like that, you know, years later, having tie-in stuff, you know, like tie-in comics and tie-in games, and things like that. But Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub Zero is DCAU all the way. No Joel Schumacher stuff anywhere. No nipples. None of that crap. This is all BTS 100%, and it's a tie-in to the show. I don't know why people thought this was tied to the film. I know there was an idea of bringing it out at the same time as the film. I can understand why they didn't, because maybe they were concerned that this movie would get some criticism. But people, as I said, watched it, fans loved it, critics praised it. Job done. Absolutely, job done. So as the movie goes along, Mr. Freeze breaks his leg after the oil rig crashed down on him, and we see Batman saves Nora Freeze, brings her to the Batwing, with Robin, and he fails to save Mr. Freeze, and he thinks Mr. Freeze dies, and obviously we know that Mr. Freeze survives. And there's so many good moments in this movie. You've got Batman and Robin fighting crime. You've got Batman and Robin, you know, working together to try and save Barbara. There was lots of good moments here. But as I said, this definitely felt more episodic than a movie. And obviously, we see that Mr. Freeze does survive. We see him holding on to one of the polar bears as they swim back to the North Pole. And this animated movie was very good, but it had a very bittersweet ending. And we've always said that, oh, Batman animated movies always have sad endings. Maybe that is true to a point. A lot of them do end on a very somber note, but for this one, it doesn't end on a somber note. It's kind of bittersweet in a way when you think about it, because we learned at the end that Nora Freeze is cured and fully revived. Everyone thinks Mr. Freeze is dead, and we see him with his whole leg, I would say, frozen in an ice cast, shall we say. And he's like slowly limping away in the blizzard with his two big polar bears, and he just disappears into the snow. I thought that was a very good ending for Mr. Freeze, and personally, I think this movie wrapped up Mr. Freeze's story arc very well. Also, we thought, and then TNBA undone it all, crapped on this movie, brought Mr. Freeze back as a head on spider legs, like something out of the mask with Dr. Pretorius, and he just went around hurting people and destroying things that meant the most to people. Yeah, that stuff just was bollocks. It's just rubbish. It was a good episode, but it just made no sense. Meltdown, which was in Batman Beyond, was a much better ending for Mr. Freeze's story arc, and I thought that was much better. Maybe if they didn't bring him back until Batman Beyond, I think maybe that could have worked a whole lot better. And one of the other highlights of this movie was Dick Grayson being a hero, not in costume, when Barbara gets kidnapped by Mr. Freeze. There's this great chase scene where Dick's on the motorcycle, speeding after Mr. Freeze in his van. I thought that was a cool moment. So I like the fact that although it's a Batman animated movie, Batman obviously does what he does. He's obviously the main guy, but I like the fact that Robin got to have a big part in this movie. He got to be a hero trying to save Barbara and getting to do different things. So I like that aspect of this movie, that Robin, he's as much a hero as Batman. So it's not a case of it's Batman and Robin, Batman taking the lead. Robin got to step up and really get to be a hero, not just in costume, but out of costume as well. But yeah, this was a very enjoyable movie. Bittersweet ending, which I thought was kind of cool. No pun intended. Cool ending. But this was a good, solid animated movie. The soundtrack, which was not provided by Shirley Walker, this time it was provided by Michael McCouston, brilliant composer. And I thought he did a really good job with the soundtrack. Some of the, operatic choral sounds kind of reminded me of Danny Elfman's Batman scores for the Tim Burton movies. I thought that he came up with a really nice theme for Mr. Freeze and his wife. I thought he did a really good job. Yeah, I think, we all love Shirley Walker, but I think you only bring in Shirley Walker if you're going to do the big, epic movies of Batman animation. If you're going to do something like Mask of the Phantasm, you bring in Shirley Walker, you bring in the big guns. That's what you do. But Batman and Mr. Freeze, SubZero is, I wouldn't say it's a heavy film. It's quite light. It's very simple. So you need a simplistic score. Michael McCouston is your man. I like that aspect of things. And if you want something a bit more techno, think Batman Beyond, with a bit of metal. Christopher Carter is your man. So I like how for certain stories, for certain scores, you bring in various composers. So I thought for this one, Michael McCouston was the right man for this film, and he did a phenomenal job with the score. Very haunting, very beautiful, very enchanting in some spots. I thought it was kind of interesting that for the SubZero intro, they took parts of the Danny Elfman Batman '89 intro. Dun 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 dun. I thought that was nice, but I thought I don't really see the point. Why don't we just use BTAS, but just you know give it a more of a bigger orchestral feel? Just never really understood that, but I do like seeing the Bat logo turn to ice. I thought that was very chilling. No pun intended. But as I said, Batman and Mr. Freeze, SubZero, very enjoyable. Story wise, very straightforward. Nothing too extravagant. No big emotional story arc. It is what it is. Mr. Freeze wants to try and save his wife, kidnaps Barbara, and Batman and Robin have to go out and save her and stop Mr. Freeze from doing what he's doing. So it's a very straightforward thing. Could have worked better as an episode, but still not taking away from the fact that this was a very enjoyable Batman animated movie. So for my rating, I am giving SubZero an honest 8 out of 10. It was very good. You know, Bigger movies like Mask of the Phantasm, Return of the Joker, or even Under the Red Hood, they're more like nines or tens out of tens. They're big, big stuff. But SubZero, an 8 out of 10, very enjoyable. As I said, it felt more episodic than a movie, but I still liked it. I wouldn't really change anything about it. And maybe it's just me, but I couldn't help but notice that Dick Grayson's design, they made him look a little bit older than he looked in the show. So I thought that was a nice touch. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know, but I liked it. And Bruce looked a little bit older. Not as old as he looked in Batman Beyond, but he looked a little bit older. So I liked that. So I thought those little things like that, those little details were quite nice. But yeah, Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero, 8 out of 10. Very good. Highly recommended for all BTAS fans. Worth checking out. Vastly more superior than Batman and Robin. And, they should have just still released it anyway. I think fans are a bit more intelligent than we give them credit for. I think they can decide what's good and what's not good. But yeah, this was very enjoyable. I really liked it a lot. And SubZero has always been one of my favorites. It's not in the top three with Phantasm, Return of the Joker, or Under the Red Hood, but it's definitely up there. I would probably say SubZero is somewhere in maybe four or five, perhaps. It's very good. It's a very good Batman animated movie, and it's good that I watched it again in preparation for this. It still holds up very well, and it's much better than I remembered. I remember the basics of it, but it had been a long time since I've seen it. But yeah, I'm glad I enjoyed watching it, and I probably will watch it again sometime in the coming months. But I won't leave it for too long. But yeah, great stuff here. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero? Did you enjoy it? What was your thoughts on the ending? Do you think that was a good ending, having Nora Freeze revived and Mr. Freeze seeing it from the window as he slowly limps away into the blizzard? Do you think that was a good ending for him? And also, what was your thoughts on Mr. Freeze kidnapping Barbara Gordon because she had the same blood type as Nora Freeze? Do you think that was a good plot? And do you think Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero worked better as a movie or as an episode? Do you think they could have turned this into a 2 or 3 part episode for the show? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the movie review series. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.